Welcome to another OmniFocus Fitness video. Today we're going to be discussing fasted versus fed state cardiovascular exercise, aerobic exercise, and how that impacts fat loss. So which one is better for fat loss? By the end of this video you'll understand what we mean by fasted. We're going to use an operational definition for the term fasted. We're also going to go into the theoretical understanding, a little bit of that physiology of why fasted cardio might be better than fed state cardio, why maybe skipping breakfast and doing your run might be better, and then we're going to actually delve into the actual science and figure out, with peer-reviewed studies, trying to figure out which one is actually better for overall fat loss when it comes to a comparison between the two. Now, of course, these videos tend to be quite long, so of course there's also a menu system for you so you can skip around to various parts of the video, and that menu system is also linked in the description box. And be sure to check out my sources and an attached free article that I've written that is also in the description box. Alright, so without further ado, let's go ahead and get to that menu system so we can move on. Let's find out, shall we? Let's do it! Alright, so first things first, we need an operational definition, which is common for this channel. We like to have operational definitions. Well, the operational definition that we need for this is fasted versus fed, obviously, but we're going to specifically be focused on fasting. So fasting has all kinds of different definitions, of course. If you go into like religion, for example, you know, fasting for throughout the entire day, or fasting for a month, or there's all kinds of different definitions for what fasting means. Fasting also in physiological terms, we've kind of defined that as a lack of food in the stomach, not eating, things like that. What we're talking about in this particular instance, we're going to make an operational definition of having not eaten in 8 or more hours. So that's what we're going with. 8 or more hours without having consumed any sort of calories whatsoever. Okay? So let's go from there. So before we actually divulge the actual answer to the question, it might be kind of fun, I think it's fun, mainly because I find it interesting, I find it fascinating, if we learn a little bit of the physiology behind what is the difference between that fasted and that fed state. What is the theoretical reasoning for why a lot of people say fasted cardio is better than fed state cardio? Well, let's go over it a little bit. So what we do know is that when we consume food, our blood glucose levels go up. So body ends up absorbing that food, blood glucose levels end up going up, and then the body has to regulate that. Because if you don't regulate it, that means that you are in a hyperglycemic state, which means you are in a pre-diabetic, diabetic state. That means, and that's based off of insulin. So insulin secretion, insulin sensitivity, insulin, all kinds of insulin things, insulin factors. So, what does that mean? We absorb food, the food, glucose goes into our bloodstream, glucose per part of blood increases, which means then the body has to mediate that by releasing insulin. Then insulin gets released, and then that insulin then helps shuttle that glucose, that excess glucose, into the cells, and then the cells do something with it. So that is in a fed state. So let's say you eat breakfast, you've eaten, food gets absorbed, glucose gets released, and then insulin gets released as a response to that glucose, and then glucose goes into the cell. That being the case, the cells, the muscle cells that you will then be using, or really just all your cells in general, will then be in a more carbohydrate use. So they'll be oxidizing, that's the technical term, they're going to be oxidizing more carbohydrates, using more carbohydrates, using those glucose molecules for energy, which means that then there's a downregulation of lipolysis. Lipolysis is the breakdown of fat. So if we're talking about a release of fat from the fat cells, then we're talking about lipolysis. It has to break down that fat that's stored in the fat cells, then release that into the bloodstream or use that for energy. So we have a downregulation of fat use, and we have an upregulation of carbohydrate use. So that's what happens in a fed state on a theoretical, physiological level. Now, in a fasted state, we basically have the opposite, right? So let's say you sleep for 8 hours, you sleep for 10 hours, you're a real bum and you sleep for 12 hours. Wake up! And then that means that you wake up and you don't eat breakfast, you just go out for your run at like 2 in the afternoon because you suck. That being the case, because you haven't consumed any food, your body needs to supply that energy. It has to supply energy. So what it's going to end up doing is actually increasing lipolysis. So you have an increase in fat oxidation. You have an increase, I should say, in fat breakdown. So you're breaking down that fat from the storage site in those cells, and you're going to have a downregulation of carbohydrate use. So you have the exact opposite. Do you have a massive release of insulin? Not necessarily, no, because you're not consuming calories, you're not consuming energy through that breakfast. So in a theoretical sense, the fasted cardio does actually burn more fat. If you were to look at things in a vacuum, if you were to look at things on an hourly basis, if you were to look at things within like that morning, the context of that morning, yes, fasted cardio does actually increase the amount of fat use. So now that we actually understand a little bit of that physiology, we can actually move on and really understand, with the inclusion of the science, the actual scientific papers, which again are all linked in my article, which is linked below, all for free. Click on it, read it for yourself. There's a specific study that actually looked exactly at this particular subject. So let's go ahead and examine the research plus what we just learned about the physiology. Let's do it. All right, the big question, is fasted cardio better than fed state cardio for fat loss? Again, in a vacuum, absolutely. It seems that the body just regulates by using that fat release, that lipolysis, that breakdown of fat to then create that energy so that we can continue with our cardio, so we can actually do our cardio. That said, in a 24-hour period over several days, several weeks, there's no benefit. There's no benefit. No benefit. That's right, you heard that right. There's no benefit to doing fasted cardio over fed state cardio. Now, why might that be? Well, the first thing is we have to know a little bit about thermodynamics. We do know that whatever calories go in and calories go out, that's what regulates our body weight. And our body weight can be made up of all kinds of different substances. Can be muscle, fat, other lean tissues, can be all kinds of stuff, organs. So if we know thermodynamics, and we know that, let's say we have two people. Person A eats 2,000 calories and person B eats 2,000 calories. They're the same body type. Let's just say they're pretty much identical. They eat the same amount, but one person does fasted cardio and the other one does fed state cardio. And let's say somehow that they both end up doing 500 calories worth of cardio. That's a ton of cardio, but we'll just put that aside for now. Just know it, 500 calories for both people. Person A, person B, 500 calories. Person B uses fed state, person A does fasted, etc., etc. So person A, because they're doing fasted, because they burn 500 calories, they end up using 500 calories. Those 500 calories are going to be mostly fat, come from lipolysis. So they're going to be fat oxidation, fat lipolysis, etc., etc. Now, person B eats breakfast. So they end up eating their breakfast. They end up eating, let's say they end up eating 500 calories. Okay, so they eat 500 calories and then they go for their run to burn off 500 calories. Well, they will end up using more carbohydrate heavy. So the calories that they're going to be burning are more carbohydrate heavy and less fat intensive, or less fat use, but more carbohydrate heavy. Now, that again, just if you were to stop right there, just based on calories alone, you'd know that the person who's fasted would lose more weight, right? Because they've just expended calories and they haven't taken in any calories. But then as you go on throughout the day, that means that eventually it gets to a point where person B, because they already ate 500 calories at the beginning of the day, later on in the day they can't eat those extra 500 calories like person A can, because person A has not consumed those first 500 calories in the morning. They've postponed their first meal till later in the day. Kind of like intermittent fasting, if you've ever heard of intermittent fasting. That's the same general principle. So that means that, let's say by 6 p.m., person B has eaten all 2,000 calories. Okay, all 2,000 calories have been consumed. However, person A has only consumed 1,500 calories because instead of eating breakfast first, they decided to go running. And then they ate their breakfast as lunch. They ate their first meal, let's say at 12 o'clock or 11 o'clock, something like that. While person B had eaten their breakfast, they had actually eaten a breakfast and had consumed their first 500 calories at, let's say, 7 in the morning or 8 in the morning, whatever time, doesn't matter. At any rate, then that means that person A still has 500 calories to consume if they're going to be consuming 2,000 calories identical to person B. Now that said, if that person A, although they already did their cardio, they still have to consume those 500 calories, their body is going to be shifting more to a carbohydrate metabolism, which means their body is going to end up shifting to more carbohydrate use. On the other hand, person B, who is now technically starting their fast, so they start their fast earlier because they're done at, I don't remember the exact time it says, I think 6 p.m., 7 p.m., something like that. They're done eating, so they can't eat anymore. So that means once that food goes out of their stomach, by whatever definition we end up using fasting for, in our definition we used 8+ hours. Those 8+ hours start at 6 p.m. or 7 p.m. While the fasted state person, they still have to eat till, I don't know, it could be 9 p.m., 10 p.m. It could be later in the day. So in the end, it equates, and again, if we know anything about thermodynamics, we know that because both people are consuming 2,000 calories and they have identical body types, and they're expending the same number of calories, that means that no matter what, the body's going to keep fluctuating between carbohydrate metabolism, or a dominant carbohydrate metabolism, I should say. It's never going to be completely carbohydrate. It's just going to be dominant towards one or the other. So it's going to be more carbohydrate dominant metabolism when they're consuming foods, as the body's trying to get rid of that glucose, and it's going to be more fat dominant metabolism when they're in a more fasted state. Especially, for example, when you're sleeping, it's definitely high fat oxidation, high lipolysis levels. So it's more of timing, but the timing doesn't really matter that much. In terms of fat loss, I'll say. In other terms, like, do some people react a little bit better to eating before they go exercise? Absolutely. Do people maybe get sick when they eat and then immediately they go running, for example? Absolutely. So in those ways, yes, it does make a difference. You should do what you feel most comfortable with. But on a physiological level and on a scientific level, actual peer-reviewed studies, the actual physiology, and application as well, all three of those combined, and you can easily say that fasted cardio actually offers no more benefit than fed state cardio in total fat loss if all other variables are the same. So that is the answer. So in the short term, yes, fasted cardio does lead to more fat loss. But if you were to extend that out and actually zoom out and look at an entire day, or look at an entire week, or look at an entire month, you would, and all the other variables were the same, and you would see no difference in fat loss. So that's the answer. Hopefully that was satisfactory. If not, I can't really say sorry. That's just the way things are. I don't know. Again, if you want more details, which I didn't mention everything, but if you want more details, check out the article. Again, it's linked below, and it's got my sources if you want to read through those too. Okay, to the summary section if you're going to stick around for that. If not, please subscribe, like, share. This is the summary of the video for those of you that need a quick recap. If not, please subscribe and check out the attached article. Alright, for you guys that just want the quick recap, the summary is for you. So we talked about how a fasted state in our definition, our operational definition, was an 8-hour or more fast. Basically we're talking about sleep. Sleep and then wake up and don't eat, you're fasted, okay? We're just gonna go with that. So in terms of theoretical understanding of fasted cardio versus fed state cardio, it seems that fasted cardio in a vacuum does actually increase fat use, called lipolysis, so the breakdown of fat. So we end up using more fat during an acute session of fasted cardio compared to a fed state of cardio. However, if you actually look at the scientific literature, then you will see that fed state cardio and fasted state cardio have the same level of fat loss in longer periods of time. So again, in a vacuum, yes, fasted cardio does lead to greater fat loss in terms of those few hours that you compare. But if you were then to extend outwards and look at 24 hours, or look at a week, or look at a month, you would see, and all other variables were the same amount of calories lost, same body type, things like that. In that case, then you would see the exact same amount of fat lost between subjects. So that kind of means that the body is constantly in an adaptive system. So although the metabolism might favor carbohydrates in one case and fat in another case, at some point in the day it ends up switching back and forth. So it's constantly in flux. It's going back and forth between carbohydrates, fat, carbohydrates, fat. It's going back and forth. So in a fasted state, it's more fat oxidation, and in a fed state, it's using more carbohydrates. But then later on, if again those calories are the same, the expenditure is the same, then it's going to be constantly switching back and forth between the two, depending on when you eat. But in the end, at the end of the day, the same number of calories are consumed, so the body still has to adapt metabolism to make sure that you're still using one substrate or another. And that ends up leading to an overall fat loss that is the exact same. So that is the video. That's what I've got to say on the subject. Of course, if you want to know more details, read more into it, as well as look at my sources, the actual scientific literature, I've got all of that linked in the article, which is linked below this video. If you found it informational, if you found this video informational, please subscribe, like, share the video. Certainly means a lot to me when I get subscribers, because I'm going to continue releasing this kind of content on a weekly, if not at the very least a bi-weekly basis. So that's it. Hope you have a great day, and I will catch you in the next video. Stay focused.